more deer and wolves than anything else. And, you know.
Be careful about those types of statements, though.
Polymet would not have bought that land to be able to shoot deer. It wants to put a copper, nickel, open pit mine there. And the Republican fairy tale is we need it because it'll make jobs for us up north. How many jobs will it make, and what will they pay, and how long will they last? We really don't want, and I know you don't want, another Superfund site in the making, which there has never been, ever, a nickel sulfur mine that the tailings from it, during the time it's in operation, and they go maybe 20 years, right? You got the tailings, they get put together. They're, you know, we don't care about them, they're the unuseful. They don't make us money. Every one of them leaks. They are absolutely poisonous to the water underneath. Where the mine would go is over a pristine water system that flows into Lake Superior. All the people downstream. There is no way to clean it up. And over in, where is it here? It's in South Dakota. Publicly funded cleanup costs exceed $130 million and counting. That's been the history of every single one of these mines. Do you have any plan in mind, now that you've approved the land swap, which again, they're not going there to hunt deer, that would prevent us having a Superfund site there in the 20 years when prices change or whatever, they run out of a vein and they leave, and those guys that, you know, the 30 people max that are actually having a job have had 20 years and now they're older and they can't get a new job kind of problem like the miners before them have had right along. I mean, what in the world are you going to do? Because this is so right.
Well, first of all, I start all of these discussions with the assumption that everybody involved in this wants to make sure we're doing things right. No one on the Iron Range, no one on the Iron Range of these folks there want to see their water polluted. They note often that they have the cleanest waters in the state, and they've been mining for a certain period of time. Now, I understand taconite mining is different than copper nickel mining, with that being said. Now, putting things in the proper order, the land swap, which is a fairly common practice that was done, was approved by the Obama administration after years of study. It does nothing to give them the permission to mine. It gives them the land that sets between two mines, and I have walked every foot of it on there. It sets between two already used mines. It used two mines between them. There is no public access to it, no road. No one in here would ever be able to use that piece of land that's sitting there for anything, for hunting or anything, because it sets on. Is that factually incorrect?
The fact is, once you have the land, you can find a way to get the law to get a road put in, because now you have the land and you need access. It's the first foot.
Well, what the Obama administration said was, we took a piece of land.
Let's not blame Obama for that one.
I'm not blaming him, I'm just blaming out the land.
If we approve the land.
You have to be able to let me explain it out as a member of Congress that I weighed these out. If you're asking me to look at me what I would do as governor, I think I have been very thoughtful. I think I have earned the respect and the right to think these things through in protection of the environment with a very strong environmental voting record, also very strong on the job creation piece. What the land swap did was moved a piece of land that could not be used by the public, gave that to Polymet to look at and explore. If they want to think about the leases, then they need to file for the permits to mine. Then they need to do the environmental impact statements. Then the state of Minnesota gets to set the liability limits and some of the things that need to be done if that's going to be mined. None of the things on the land swap could, that land swap could sit there for eternity and not anything happen.
So there's a Republican governor.
Well, I think that
And
one of the reasons we
changes.
think it's very important that we put people in the governor's office that are going to weigh the cost benefits analysis, that are going to understand the economic activities that can come from mining, plus the idea of copper. And we know what the copper is used in. It is used in the renewable energy economy. It's used in Teslas, it's used in cell phones, it's used in solar panels and those types of things. So what I've said on this, and I don't think when you said we have a difference on this, I don't think there's a lot of difference, because I assume that you want to see good economic activity for all Minnesotans. I also think you want to see pristine waters that are protected with all the sound environmental requirements put in place. I want that too, and I would argue that the folks who do the mining up north. I think what we, and Peggy and I have talked about is making sure that there are no shortcuts taken to this. When the attempt was to try and shortcut over on the other mine by getting rid of the 2-year study, I voted against that. I don't want to, I'm not gonna short circuit the process. But I think we explore it, we put things in place, we lay the evidence out. I am not assuming ahead of time before I see any of these things. I've never seen a mining plan. I've never seen an environmental impact statement. I've never seen what the permit is going to look like. Those are things that the next governor is going to do. I think you're absolutely right. If the next governor of Minnesota is a Republican, those things are not going to hold as much weight. So we need to together make the case in the state of Minnesota. How do we do economic activities still holding true to this idea that we can protect the environment? In southern Minnesota, it's that piece between clean water and farming. How are you able to do that? Clean water and city and the runoff from that. How do we continue to do that? And I am still hopeful on this. So at this point in time, from the point of exploration to the point of mining, the land swap is right here. It's on that front piece. Now, I'm not blaming the Obama administration. I'm being very honest with you about this. I think my trust in that the study was done a little better than what's coming out right now when our scientists are being let go and climate change is being denied. I think the Obama administration's recommendations on the land swap do hold more weight, honestly, on that. And Peggy, I don't.
May I point out that the DFL Environmental Caucus is meeting November 18, you're right, Saturday, at 1:30 Maplewood Library, that's in St. Paul, right?
Yep.
And that goes from 1:30 to 3. From 3 to 4:40, there's a sulfide mining forum. We're gonna get the real scientific, environmental, etc. viewpoint and the politics of it. I know you guys have real busy schedules, you know, it's an open forum, and any of folks in the room that wanna go or come ahead.
No, I think it's good you're doing that. And the miners have been invited?
I think that
That's
did
the way
happen,
we should do this.
and I think labor, but again, it might be, maybe 30 people, and they won't be in a union. The people in a union are the ones that first dig the mine with their big machinery, because they have a heavy union. But the people that get hired later,
No.
they're not. And you can't guarantee how long that job's gonna last. The history
No, but
of mining up there.
I understand your concerns.
Length of job.
We dove right into this, and I went right up there, and I'm glad that the folks up on the range and just said, at least when we went there, we're talking about the issue. We're not dodging, want to put it forward. I'm sure like I said, all the Republican candidates go up north and say you can mine wherever you want. You can do whatever you want. You can do this. Their message probably is going to be better on that. Our message is much broader for the Iron Range. It's about making sure that there's economic activities, making sure there's investments in education, making sure there's investments in infrastructure and all the things necessary. So this is at a point, as a member of Congress, I am the only one who's had to make a decision on this. I followed the principles of looking through this as I think through decision making and came to the conclusion that the land swap was a better deal for Minnesota. But it doesn't do anything yet. They're going to have to go through all the other studies before they ever get to that point. And those are decisions that the next governor is going to have to make.
And we look forward to continuing this conversation on the 18th.
It's important.
Yeah, I'll definitely be there. And I think the additional piece that we talked about a lot, like listen, Monoman, wild rice, really important. It's literally how, like, this is why Ojibwe
We're
people.
the land of 10,000 lakes, and
Right,
some of
but
them
it's
are
also,
orange.
it's why Ojibwe people live here. It's why my community lives here, right? And that's something that we take very seriously. There's also research and science that we have to look at behind water quality as well. So I'm super excited to be part of this conversation on the 18th, and I hope that we can continue it.
And please know, we put a team together to try and solve this. When I was running without a running mate, maybe people were that, and then all of a sudden they said, oh, yeah, Peggy, you've done. Well, yes, because Peggy's got a different perspective on this, a broad perspective on Ojibwe traditions on wild rice, sulfite standards and all that. This is how you should work to try and build coalitions to try and figure out how to do this right. So
I just wish you wouldn't open the door wide enough. They're putting their big fat foot in with all the money behind them and all the PR departments writing to the newspapers up there. It is the Republican fairy tale from end to end. It does not create jobs up there. It does not
well, in all
lead
fairness,
to a good result.
they would respond to you and said, have you lived there recently? Have you lived in Hibbing? Are you
I
familiar?
lived with a father who was a milkman. Do you know how long that job lasts when
No, fair enough. I'm just saying that I think communicating together, all of us, because I think that there's a real opportunity in Minnesota to start to heal on this, because they will drive the rift right between us on these issues, try and drive the rift between us on environmental protections and economic growth. It's a game plan that gets played out time and you've witnessed it, Kevin, time and time again. So, but we will continue this. This has to be a continuous conversation. Anyone else?
One more.
All right, we're going.
Do you support, it's just Northfield is trying to develop a municipal ID that will give documentation on benefits. Do you support efforts for documentation for those without leaving Minnesota or protecting undocumented immigrants in Minnesota? Or protecting
For driver's licenses and that type of, yes. It makes sense. Folks are here. We're and I would encourage all of you. I have not got to read the whole series yet. They did a series in Rochester on DACA and some of the things that are there. But I think Peggy and I both stood on this. I won't speak for you. I did since I ran for Congress. The idea of making sure that everyone who's driving on Minnesota roads is licensed and has a license to do so, and trying to get to work in a legal manner. That just makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, unfortunately, towards the end of the last session, we saw politics played with communities of color and with undocumented folks. And my hope would be that we have enough space to have those full conversations where folks don't feel like they're being pitted against each other or like communities are being divided. Our undocumented residents in Minnesota are part of this community. They're the folks who make this community work every day, and we should do everything that we can to make sure that people feel seen, heard, and valued. And that's part of that.
I'm going to give one last statement here as we go on. Thanks to all of you for being here. It's the beginning of a conversation. You're very generous with your time on a Sunday afternoon. This is a big decision. Seriously, the flavor and the history and the progressive nature of Minnesota will be tested come next November. But in that test comes an opportunity. People who say, I'm worried about the future, if you're really worried about the future, let's change it. Let's make the future that we want to have happen. And come back as we go into Veterans Day. It is still the one bastion, for the most part, where there's a lot of bipartisanship. And then people say, well, it's an easy issue. It's not an easy issue, because there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars being poured in by Koch brothers and some of these groups to privatize the VA. Now people say, well, what's wrong with that? Why should veterans have the right to go wherever they want? The veteran community, 94% of them want the VA to be funded. They want the VA to provide the specialty care they need. They want the VA to do research into dioxin poisoning from Agent Orange and from burn pits in the current war. They want to make sure that when people lose interest in the current war, or they start to think that was the past war, that the VA is always there, always on the ready to care for them. So we've moved things like new GI Bills. We've moved things on appeals reform. We've moved things to try and make a difference in their lives while trying to push back on this idea that you should just give the veteran the card and they should go wherever they want. That's not the organized care. I will say this on the issue of toxic exposures. Our nation has struggled with this forever. It took us 20 years, basically, to pass the first Agent Orange Act, and Obama administration and Trump administration both allowed that to expire, which means that the research dollars going into it have expired. We don't know what the long-term, we know, and I'll tell you, there's a gentleman, he's a retired principal down in Wabasha, Mike Trost. He came to me back in 2007 and he said, Tim, I have coffee with a group of guys. We have two things in common. We all went to Vietnam and we all have Parkinson's disease. And we commissioned a study on that, and in late 2009, the Secretary of the VA added Parkinson's as a presumption from Agent Orange, which means everybody who had Parkinson's who served in Vietnam could get the care for their Parkinson's through the VA that they were denied from. That took till 2009 to recognize that dioxin poisoning led to Parkinson's. We closed that program off now. We do not know second and third generation impacts of this, spina bifida with the children of Vietnam veterans exposed to Agent Orange, and the grandchildren are now coming of age where we're starting to see rare cancers in them. So this is an area that we have to fight on, and I will leave you this thought about why elections matter and how these things can get so twisted. I had a bill that I introduced when I first got to Congress. You only get coverage in the VA for Agent Orange if you stepped foot for one day in Vietnam or on the rivers. Well, there were a whole bunch of people who were on ships right off the coast of Vietnam. and the rivers poured into Gulf of Tonkin. They pumped the water through the filters and they drank it. And it had dioxin in it. They are called Blue Water Navy veterans. So I had a bill that would allow them to be covered under Agent Orange exposure, even though they didn't step on there. Well, last Thursday, my Republican colleagues brought that bill up for a vote, which was, you'd think would be a good thing. But because of the rules that the Republicans put in place, the bill had to be paid for by other money in the VA committee. So the way they proposed to pay for this was to take every other veteran who was receiving a disability check and round it down. So if they were receiving $131.87, they were going to take the 87 cents. Or they were going to take the benefits that went to the surviving spouse from the person who died from Agent Orange exposure and take those benefits back to pay for it. And this is where the politics has got to end on this. That was the very same day they proposed the tax cuts to the top 0.2%. And I was angry in the committee because I had to vote against my own bill, something I fought for 24 years in uniform and 11 years in Congress. I had to vote against my own bill because I'm not going to take money from wounded warriors to pay for another group of wounded warriors when we were proposing a tax cut for the very rich. So I proposed, and they said, well, can you find the money? I said, sure. How about taxing people who got deferments for Vietnam to pay for those who went? Now I won't do that because that's how our politics gets poisoned, but that's the frustration that I felt. So I said, as we go into Veterans Day, there is great unity in our country of getting it right for them. There's great unity in getting it right for our children. There's great unity in that we have to figure out a way to curb global warming, climate change, and climate destruction. There is great unity on that. The trick to getting it done is going to take leadership. It's going to take people who can get both sides into the room and get something done on it, who can build coalitions that tackle our toughest problems in the state. So what Peggy and I want to do over the next, I guess, till February, is the process will start. And then in the November election, is continuing to talk about this, continuing to get you engaged in the process, continue to have you believe, because I, as someone who's been in this and as a teacher, I understand that skepticism with our political system, that's healthy. That's a good American trait. Be a little bit skeptical of that. Cynicism is cancerous when you believe it doesn't matter and it's all that. This is our time. This is our generation's time. This is an opportunity to fix the politics. This is an opportunity to not just find disagreements, but to understand that this is the way it's supposed to work, the give and take and getting things done. And as Peggy said, we firmly believe that what the politics of the last few years has done, and this politics of division, that it's opened up space for a new way of going about it. It's opened up space for co-governing. It's opened up space for people who believe they've got no right at the table, or who believe that these are intractable solutions, who believe that no one's listening on this. Let's bring people to the table and try and figure it out. So give us a look. We want to earn your support for this ticket. More importantly, we want you to feel part of it. There's going to be ample opportunities to volunteer. We want you to be delegates for us come February to the state, the DFL caucuses, and then on to the convention. And then be there as we move into November. Because again, for those of you who are Minnesota and those of you not, look at that map, and I saw it in the paper today. There's one blue island left in the upper Midwest, and they will spend and are already spending daily millions and millions of dollars to pound on this race, to tell you that we don't look like Minnesota, to tell you that we don't understand what rural Minnesota looks like. There will be a time with our Republican colleagues, I will challenge them to go to the farm and see if they know farming as well as I do. We'll find out if they do. We'll have a time to ask people to go up north and walk the land where pipelines are going to go and talk to people who build them and understand what their lives looks like. That's what a governor's campaign can look like. That's what we can do to change the entire conversation. So join us, go online, sign up, talk to the organizers who are here. And Peggy?
Thank you.
There we go.